Hey everyone, I'm Brian Parks, the CEO of Synapse Software, and in this video I want to do a little more conceptual overview of what Slingshot is and kind of where we're going with the product. In the last video I did kind of a brief demo overview of Slingshot, the actual interface, and some examples of what it can do, but I want to go a little bit kind of under the surface but not too technical, and talk about where it is now and where we're going in the future. So with that, let's do a quick diagram. So Slingshot is built in layers. So each layer builds on top of the one underneath it, and that makes it a lot more testable for us, but it also means that each component is available to you to build your solutions on top of. And you'll see that as we get into the diagram. So the very bottom layer is storage. And there are a bunch of different storage mechanisms that we use. I'll list some of them in just a minute here. But on top of that, we build integration. Basically, from its very first origins, Slingshot was a way to store data and a way to interact with that data, to integrate it with other systems, to access it, and to populate it from external systems. So that's built into the core of what Slingshot is. On top of that, we have programmability. And I'll show exactly what that is in just a couple slides. Then we have presentation set on top of that. And when I say presentation, I don't mean the actual things that you see. I mean the way that's defined. So the structures that go into place to determine how a board is laid out and what data shows up in a board or a service catalog or something like that. And then on top of that, we have the UI, which actually translates that into something that you can see. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what each one of these layers actually is comprised of. So in storage, everything in Slingshot is a collection. And a collection is just a fancy word for a set of data that more or less looks the same. So you might have a people collection because each item in that collection would be a person. You might have, if you're doing ITSM, you might have an incidents collection, and each item in there is an incident, and so on and so forth. It's basically, you could think of it like a database table, if that's the way, the association that your mind automatically makes. It's a little more powerful than just a database table, but that's not a terrible way to think of it. If you're familiar with something like MongoDB, it's a lot more similar to, they actually call it collections in MongoDB verbiage. Very similar to that. But of course we have different actual database backends. So you can store your information in flat files. That's actually where we started. It makes it really easy for us to develop on a local machine, and really easy to edit some of the underlying data structures and configuration that goes into the system. We also have support for MySQL and MariaDB. That's currently what we are using in our production environments. So if you request an environment from us and we spin one up, it's using MySQL or MariaDB as its data storage. That gives us a little bit better performance without losing any of the functionality that we have built into the tool. We're also in the future planning to support MongoDB and SQLite. MongoDB for production use cases, because we think we can get a little bit better performance out of MongoDB than we can from even MySQL and MariaDB. And SQLite for local development purposes, so you don't have to install a full MySQL or MongoDB server on your development machine. We're also thinking about some other backends like Microsoft SQL Server and potentially some others. If there's something that you're specifically interested in, leave a comment below or shoot us an email. There will be an email address toward the end of this slide deck. Definitely let us know if there's a particular backend you want us to support. All of this is completely testable, and all the code paths are very similar, so that we can be confident that if it works on one database backend, it'll work just as well on another database backend. On top of that, we have schemas, which is basically our way of describing the structure of the items in a particular collection. So collections don't have to have a schema, but they can. And if you have a schema, you can validate some fields, you can auto-populate some fields, and there's some other functionality built in that we'll actually explore in a future video. So stay tuned for that, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified when that video comes out. And then of course there's security. So users and security groups, both of those are actually collections, so everything is built on top of the layer beneath it. So security groups and users are both collections, but they're used internally by the system to track who's logged in, whether you're authenticated, whether you have access to a particular collection, and what you can do with that collection. So it's all kind of encapsulated away, and everything built on top of this goes through the same authentication and authorization mechanism to determine if the user you're logged in as has access to the collection that you're trying to access and can do the thing you're trying to do. So it's all very tightly integrated, and actually it's all accessed via a REST API. So aside from this storage layer, everything else in the system can be accessed via the same REST API. The only reason we don't extend it down through the storage layer so that you can get direct access to collections, direct access to users, direct access to security groups, is so that it all goes through that security mechanism. You can certainly create new users, update users, that sort of thing. Same thing with security groups through the REST API, but it all goes through the security mechanism. So no functionality within the system ever bypasses that security mechanism. Everything starts on top of that. And of course, the REST API provides any sort of integration you might want. So data coming in, accessing data from the system, and of course, you might want to send data out from the system that's initiated from Slingshot as opposed to initiated from your other system. And so we have a functionality that we call APIs, which is basically a way to describe the endpoint that it would talk to, complete with authentication, information, headers, anything that would go into the actual HTTP request is defined in this API, and then you can use it actually in the programmability layer, but we consider this part of the integration layer because it's one of the core pieces of that functionality. And then we also have something called mappings. So if you've used a piece of middleware or another system that kind of joins other systems together, provides integration, there might be some way that you can map the response from one API into a request to another API, or a request to one API to another request to another API. One JSON document to another, an XML document to a JSON document, that sort of thing. Right now, this exists in JSON land, but it's basically that. It's a map from one JSON format to another. Very flexible, but very simple. You'll notice that each one of these building blocks is intended to be something that's pretty self-describing, fairly simple, fairly straightforward, small building blocks that we can use in combination with each other or built on top of others to piecemeal build up this very sophisticated system. So when we get into the programmability layer, we get into something that we call actions. And this is basically just you can think of it as a script that pulls together a bunch of other pieces, does some manipulation to them, setting values on a particular record, saving records, creating new records, that sort of thing, strung together into repeatable actions. Currently, they're written in Python, but we're working on building that into a user-friendly interface, both to developers who might be familiar writing Python and just want to write the code themselves, or the more business-level user who doesn't want to write Python but still wants to get the functionality out of the system. So that's something we're working on. Next, we have triggers, which is basically the ability to run an action on specific events. So I actually did a video about this a couple of weeks ago. I called it the types of automation processes. And basically what it boils down to is things that happen when you create a record, things that happen when you change a record, things that happen after some delay, things that happen on a particular schedule, or things that happen once at a particular point in time. So I'll leave a link to that video down in the description, but that's basically what triggers are. And then in the spirit of building everything else on top of the things below it, we have jobs, which is basically the combination of an action and a trigger, a particular instance of that running action. So if you have an action that only runs once, you'll have the trigger associated with it, and you'll have one job. If you have something that happens on a schedule, you'll have one job for every time that action or that trigger fires and that action runs, and so on and so forth. Continuing to move up the stack, one thing that we're adding in the near future is searching and querying. And I make a distinction here because I've seen some confusion around these terms with other systems and how they end up being used. So the way we define searching is basically like Google. You type in a word and it gives you all relevant results. That's what we're going for when we talk about searching. Whereas querying, we're talking more about structured data. So things that you might expect from a database. So you might filter based on specific fields and specific values that appear in those fields. Not that you can't use some of the more natural language processing aspects of searching, but the spirit of it is definitely more geared toward getting a specific subset of records, whereas searching is geared toward getting the most relevant records first and gradually getting less and less relevant. So it's a slightly different goal in mind when you're searching versus querying. So next up, we have a few different UI paradigms. So we have boards, we have lists, and we have forms. Lists and forms are basically a tabular view of the data in a table, and forms are how you edit the data, or maybe just see a read-only view of the data. And then boards are like a Kanban board. So you have various columns, and you might have stages that you pull little cards from one column to another, and so on. If you've used Trello before, it's very similar to that. If you've used Jira, Jira has something called boards, very similar to that. And then there's actually another one that I didn't list here because it's kind of in a category by itself, but service catalog. So this is another way of presenting data, but it's definitely a read-only interaction. So on top of that, or coming next, we plan on adding a way to customize those lists, a way to customize the forms, and something that we call dashboards. So rather than just having views of the raw data, we want to add the capability to have more of a visualization, so you can get more easy access, quick at a glance, a condensed form of that information right at your fingertips, and provide a little bit more customizability to the UI. Because right now, the entire UI is completely automatically generated based on the way the data is defined. So you don't have to build any UI in the system right now, and we plan on keeping that into the future. If you don't want to build any UI, You don't have to build any UI. It's automatically built from the data that you provide. It might not be the prettiest, it might not be the most user-friendly, but it's there. It'll be there. You'll never be in a situation where you can't use your system. You add a collection, you add a schema, you have a way to interact with it. And that's, from day one, that's been something that we've been very intent on maintaining within the system. And then, of course, we have a few other things on our plate that we want to do in this presentation area. And of course, we love taking your feedback into account. So if you have specific ideas or you have specific needs, we'd love to hear that. We'd love to incorporate that into the system on top of the things that we have planned that we think you'll be really excited to see in the next few months. Continuing to go up the stack, we have the web UI, which is, from the very beginning, this is what we built. We built it with REST API in mind, so web UI was kind of an obvious next step. And this is the automatic UI that you get out of the box. Now, in addition to that, we have plans to build some other user interfaces. Mobile might make an appearance. At the very least, the web UI will be responsive. It's a little bit right now, but that's something that we're planning on improving over the coming months. And we have a few other ideas for ways that we can integrate really powerful and really practical user interfaces on top of what we already have. So that's basically the overview of Slingshot and all the various components at a very conceptual level. Now, in future videos, we'll actually be diving into some of these conceptual boxes and doing kind of deep dives into what they are, how to use them, how to configure them, how to build them into scenarios with some of the other aspects, and getting into even more practical aspects of how to actually use Slingshot to do exactly what you're trying to do. So you can do the awesome stuff that you do and not have to worry about the system as much. So again, subscribe to the channel for information on that, and stay tuned for those videos. Here's the link if you want more information. If you want to try Slingshot out for yourself, go ahead and shoot us an email at info@synapsesoftware.com. We'd love to learn more about your organization and your needs, and find out how we can help you achieve your goals, whether you're doing IT service management, enterprise service management, digital transformation, business process automation. Insert favorite buzzword here. Whatever you want to do, we want to help you do that, and we think Slingshot is the perfect tool to get you further along your path. So let us know. And of course, please like this video if you found it helpful. Share it with other people within your organization if you think they might be interested in checking out Slingshot as well. And subscribe to the channel so that you can be notified when we release those videos that are more deep dives into each one of those specific components that make up the Slingshot platform. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.